of these positional exercises is a slightly deep example, I think, because white actually has a very, very promising position and black is under a lot of pressure. And if white does everything just more or less right, then black will be in deep trouble. We can look at the most obvious line white has. Bishop d4, attacking the pawn on b6, forcing black to play b5, after which bishop c5 suddenly gives black a lot of problems, or more or less it wins instantly. So therefore b5 cannot be played. So we would look at how would black defend himself. And by looking, sometime you'll find queen g5. The idea is with opposite colored bishops, black would like to exchange queens and therefore avoid a direct attack, mating attack against his king. If this should cost a pawn, he wouldn't care less. The main point is that he can try to get active with his bishop, control the light squares, then white can have the dark squares, and then we can share the board in the middle and take a draw. However, in this line, it goes something like this in Karpov's annotations. Take, take. Now I have to look. Take on b6, rook c2, a3, rook e8, bishop d4, g4. In this position, it's not easy for white to do something about his king side. And he's not very active, he has no real target. Black is very active, has good counterplay, and the right evaluation of the position is just a slight advantage for white. He has a pawn, but whatever he can use it for is not really obvious. However, let's just give queen g5 an exclamation mark. White is Karpov, who is one of the best players of prophylactic thinking. Actually, it seems that a lot of his play is nothing but prophylactic thinking, and only in the end, when he has completely taken all opportunities from his opponent, he can think about attacking himself. In this position, he finds a very, very nice move. h4, preventing the move queen g5. Black does not have a chance to free himself by taking on d6 and g6 because of the mate. So therefore he must try something else. Now if he plays something like rook c2, white will play bishop d4, bishop c8, take on b6, take on e2 and bishop c5, and next white will take on h6, and he will be completely winning. Also there's the threat of rook takes a6. So therefore black has to try something. If he plays rook fc8, then comes bishop d4. Of course b5, bishop c5 is very terrible. Bishop d4 gives a clear advantage. And I think here that rook c1 could be worth a try, but still white should be able to win. There's a strong attack on the king. He can play e6. There are many different tactics. Probably exchange on c1 and king h2. White has a clearly winning position, but how to actually win it is not so easy to say immediately. It's black to move, and maybe he can make a little defense. There's some options like rook d1, which should be considered. Rook c7, rook c8. Just as long as black does not play b5. Even a5 should be considered here. Still, it's a very, very good position for white. It's difficult to find defense for black. And maybe he will have to, because he has to calculate 10 moves, and on each of them he will maybe find a forced white win, and he will only find one or two which can actually be played. So it'll be very difficult to defend. After h4, black tried e3, and white chose to ignore this pawn and playing bishop d4. Now there are several lines. Karpov gave a very nice winning line after taking on f2. Rook takes f2, rook fc8, rook d2, which he's very fond of. Now after something like rook e8, white will play bishop f8. There's some options of rook d7. On queen f8 he will play b5, takes, bishop a3, bishop rook c4 with the idea b4, e6, b4, bishop b2, f5 and e7, opening up. Black's really in trouble here. If queen takes, rook d7 will give two problems, even though this is an exchange down here. So therefore on e7 he must play queen f7. Now comes rook d8 with the idea rook takes e8, winning in several ways. And comes rook c8. And now simply take, rook d8, and white is winning. For if something like g6, just queen e5. This shows how the mating attack with the upside colored bishop is very, very dangerous for black. And as you see here, these variations of course are not completely forced. This was just a way to illustrate how bad black's position is, and Karpov's line illustrates it very, very well. In the game, Mecking realized that he had to create some kind of counterplay. So he tried to advance the pawn to e2. Came rook e1. And then he played g6. Gives white a chance to take on b6. Black took on d6. White took on d6, queen e6. And now a very nice move, f3. Opens up for both the king and the queen going to f2, attacking the pawn. And also it plays against the bishop on c6, on here. If white takes on a2, then d7 will win instantly. So therefore black played bishop d6, bishop c6. White now play queen f4, threatening on h6. Comes king f7, king f2, threatening the pawn. Bishop b5, bishop e3, threatening again. Now this time it cannot be defended. King g8, take on h6. Now the threat is bishop d4. Black play queen e5, because queen takes d6, bishop c5 is just over. Queen e5. We can see how the attack again is the most lethal thing. White is living quite firmly and quite healthily with the pawn on e2. Still, he would like to get rid of it. And here he has the good chance of creating another passed pawn, and he chooses the endgame. It's very easily winning. In the end, black is mated all the same. There was no hope in the position. So this example closes the lesson in prophylactic thinking, trying to understand what your opponent wants to do. Here we have a winning position, and in winning positions normally we think about how to finish the opponent off. However, Karpov, one of the greatest players in the history of chess, instead realizes that black has only one defense against slowly being grinded down, and that's trying to exchange the queens. So he doesn't allow exchange of queens before it's absolutely winning some 11 moves later. Here he plays h4 and prevents exchange of queen, and therefore keeps all his trumps, the weakness of the g7 square. Again, in this position we see the weakness of b6, the weakness of g7. I've talked a lot about weaknesses in these lessons, and I think weaknesses are one of the most important things to understand in chess, because our play is guarded against weaknesses all the time. We never attack the opponent where he's strongest, or more correctly, when we do, we hurt ourselves. It's a very simple thing. We don't go around in our fights in the pubs when we're drunk and try to hit people on the knees. And especially not with our teeth, though maybe one or two of you have had this experience. So we didn't attack our weakest spot. We don't attack the opponent's strongest spot with our weakest tool. We attack his weakest spot. We give him a good shove, a good kick in the belly or something. Instead, with our feet, we take our strongest weapons and guard them against his weakest spot. And if there's any parents listening to this with their children, I hope they will forgive me for this allegory. But I'm sure that every kid who has been in a fight in the sandbox know what I'm talking about. However, you should not fight. Only in chess, where you should fight